Now let's talk about another important OOPS concept that is called as overriding. Right, overriding. If I talk about overriding, we also call it as dynamic binding. Right, we also call it as late binding, and we also call it as runtime polymorphism. Right. So far we have seen like overloading, right, which was early binding and a compile time polymorphism, right. Now overriding is another very important concept, right, and it is very widely used in framework defining, right. In overriding, we have different classes where the inheritance is applied. Right. So I'm talking about classes where we have like the child and parent relationship, where the inheritance is already applied, and where we have methods with same signature. Right. In case of overloading, we have the same method name with different signature. But in case of in case of overriding, we have same method with same signature. Same method name and the signature will gonna remain same. And the most important part is that the classes should be inherited. There should be a parent and child relationship in these classes. Again, in general terms, if we talk about overriding, what is overriding? Right, at the time, at times we override a file. Right, so overriding doesn't mean that we are replacing the file. We are just overriding that file, right? Changing the inner content of that file. Right, the file remains same, everything remains same, just we are overriding it. Right, we are just replacing the content, the file will remain the same. So what happens in overriding is, let's say we take up example, let's say there's a bank RBI, that is like Reserve Bank of India, right, which is like a parent bank of all the banks, right. So let's say RBI has got many functionalities, like you can get the home loan rate of interest from the RBI, right. Let's say you are going to buy a new house and you're looking for some home loan, so you'll not directly go to RBI to get the loan, right? You'll go to different banks. You'll go to Citibank. You'll go to HSBC Bank. You'll go to any number of other banks, and you're gonna check the rate of interest from each bank, right? Now, let's say if I talk about RBI, the standard rate of interest for home loan. Let's say I remove it. This is a standard method which will actually gonna return us the interest, the rate of interest for the home loan, the standard home loan, let's say it returns 8.5, right? So if it is returning something, then the method should not be void, it should be double, right? What else we can get? We can like we can also get public double get car loan rate of interest, right? And let's say it should return 10.5. So now, when any customer goes out and he wants to like get the home loan, he'll check, he'll call this method get home loan rate of interest, and it will actually going to return the rate of interest as 8.5. And same in the same way, if we go out for a car loan, then the rate of interest returned will be 10.5, a standard rate of interest. Now, let's create another bank. Let's say I'm going to create a new bank with the name as Citibank, right? And Citibank is, let's say, the child bank of RBI Bank, right? Now, let's say a customer goes to Citibank and inquires about the home loan rate of interest, right? Now, what Citibank will gonna do? Citibank already have a parent bank as RBI bank, and there's a method already implemented over here which can return us the rate of interest of the home loan. So what Citibank has done, he like in order to access this method, we need to create an object of Citibank. We said city obj equal to new city bank, and then we'll say obj dot let's say the method name is get home loan rate of interest, and if I gonna print it, it will actually gonna return us the rate of interest value, that is 8.5, which is the standard rate of interest. So if you see over here, 8.5 is written. Now, what happens over here? 8.5 rate of interest, it's a standard rate of interest of RBI. And Citibank, they think that in 8.5, their requirement will not going to be fulfilled. They want to keep, they want the rate of interest should be on a higher side, otherwise they'll not be able to manage their home loan product, right? So they want that the functionality should remain same, right? But the implementation should be different as compared to what RBI is offering, right? Now, in this case, Citibank might gonna create his own method of getting the home loan rate of interest and might keep the rate of interest as 10.5. So Citibank is not actually changing the implementation of get home loan rate of interest of RBI, right? It is creating the same functionality over here, right? By changing the implementation, means by overriding the method that is written inside RBI, right? It's not changing inside over here. It is actually creating the same method inside its own class and changing the implementation. Because here the parent class is not fulfilling the requirement that is actually required by the child class, right? So whenever parent class is not able to fulfill the requirement of a child class, in that case what child class it does, it overrides the method of a parent class. Now this is a little bit confusing question, that why do we perform overriding. So overriding is performed when we have the clear requirements with us, right? And the parent is not able to fulfill the requirement of a child, right? So here the functionality, the function, the method name, it remains the same, right? Whatever that we have in parent class, we are not going to change the method name. The method name will gonna remain the same, just the inner functionality will be changed, will be defined as per the requirement of the child. Now let's practically implement it and then understand how it actually gonna work. Now let's say the same method that we have in RBI, we're gonna use the same method over here and change the implementation. Now it will actually gonna return 10.5. Now this is what overriding is, right? Here the overriding is actually taking place because the method signature over here and over here is the same, right? So this is what overriding is. Now if I gonna run the Citibank, the child class over here, it will actually gonna return 10.5. Now, in the same way, let's say another bank comes. We're going to create one more bank over here. Let's say HSBC Bank, right? And same functionality, like customer can come to HSBC Bank as well for taking a home loan. So same thing we're gonna have for HSBC Bank as well. So let's say if HSBC does not have that method for getting the home loan interest, uh, we first need to extend the initial RBI rank over here as well, right? So if I run this thing now, so again 8.5, let's say HSBC is not satisfied with 8.5, so he can also implement the same method. He can also override the method from RBI, and he can also change the rate of interest to something else. It could be 10.25, right? So implementation will be different as per different banks, because rate of interest will gonna remain different for different banks, but the functionality it remains the same. So that is what I mean. If you look over here, that is what we have seen so far, that methods are having the same signature, and inheritance is also applied over here, right? Now, today we are just looking at the overview of what overriding it. We are just looking at basic syntax in this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll gonna see how we what are the benefits of overriding is actually, right? Because I mean, if we talk about some APIs like Selenium, right? In entire Selenium, we have so many overridden methods, right? It's full of overriding, right? For example, you take one example of a class called as Firefox driver, right? In Firefox driver, while typing on a browser, we use a method called as send keys. While clicking on any element or button, radio button, checkboxes, we use a method called as click, right? If I want to perform click on a Chrome browser, so what method do we gonna call on Chrome? Do we have any method that says click on Chrome? No, we have the same click method, right? So click method is for IE as well. Click method is for Safari as well. Click method is common for Chrome as well. But the implementation inside might be different, right? Depending on the browser APIs. So the functionality of clicking, it remains the same for all the browsers. So right now, we're just going to understand the concept of overriding, right? Because if we are able to understand what overriding is, then the concepts like interface and abstract classes, these concepts are completely following overriding, right? So if we are familiar with the basic concept of overriding, these things will be very simple for us. All right. So there's a very important question that's being asked in interviews most of the time, that can we change return type while performing overriding? Right. Now, with overriding, like we call it as a runtime polymorphism as well, right? Why we call it as runtime polymorphism? Because if you take a look over here, things are changing, things are decided at the runtime, right? When we are executing the code. At the runtime, it is actually giving the output of this get home loan rate of interest method, right? If you remember, like when we run this is actually calling the method of a child class, not of a parent class. And if a method is not there inside the child class, it will gonna call the method of a parent class. If you remember, we discussed about the inheritance tree, right? So things are executed based on inheritance, and then over here it is actually on the runtime, the functionality is being executed, right? So that is the reason we call it as runtime polymorphism. So why we call it as late binding? Because it binds after running the code, right? So after running it binds, so we call it as late binding, right? Why we call it as dynamic binding? Because the binding is dynamic. If the method is not there with the child, the method that will be binded will be of his parent, and if the method is not there with the parent, then the method that will be binded will be of the parent that is one hierarchy above, right? So that is the reason we call it as dynamic binding as well. Now let's come to the question again. Can we change the return type while performing overriding? Right. So what will be the answer? Will it be yes or will it be no? Let's take a look over here. Now let's say if I am in a child class and if I change the return type to int, right, and I'll remove this value over here. Now you can see we have got an error. So let's mouse over and see it says the return type is incompatible with RBI dot get home loan. So RBI is the parent class, right? So as soon as we have changed the return type, it came to know that this is a overridden method. It says that the change return type of overridden get home loan ROI or change the return type of this method to double. So the answer to this question is no, we cannot change the return type while performing overriding. Again, I can change this answer to yes as well, right? So this again depends on the condition. So we cannot and we can as well. So why no? No in the case when the return types are primitive, right? Primitive as in we have primitive data types. Like if in case you want to search for what all primitive data types are there. So say primitive data types in Java. So you're going to see the list of primitive data types. So these are like Boolean, byte, char, short, int, string, right? Sorry, and not string, it's int, long, float, double. These are basically the primitive data types in Java. Right. And yes, in case the return types are class name, right? So method when when do we have the return types as a class name? So when a method will actually going to return you object, then the method will going to have the return type as class name. So in case the return types are class name, we can change the return type at the time when we are overriding that method, right? I'm going to show you that. So let us see when do we have return types as class name. Can a method have a return type as a class name? Yes. Let's say I create a method which actually returns the object of this class itself. So I can say get object. So I'm actually getting the object from this method. It will return the object. How it will gonna return it? I'm gonna say XSBC obj equal to new XSBC. So I'm creating an object of this class, and it's at the end it should return me obj. Right. And whenever we are returning an object, the return type will be of that class only. So we're gonna write it in this way. So this is how we have created a method which will actually returning us the object of this HSBC class. Now I can copy this and I can go to the RBI bank and I can create a method over here which will gonna have the return type of RBI like this. Now you can see there's no error over here, right? We have a method with the same signature but a different return type. In the case where the return types are basically the class name, right? Or I can change this to something called as covariant, right? Now this is another keyword, covariant. What covariant is? Now let's understand what covariant is. Covariant means the return types are class name and there is parent child relationship between those classes, right? Now let us understand it practically. Now again, look at the method get object method in RBI. The same method is there in HSBC. The return type over here is the class name, and if we talk about the relationship in this class and this class, this has got a parent-child relationship. So that is what covariant it means. The return types are class name, right? And there is a parent-child relationship between those classes. So we also call it as covariant. So yes, we can change the return type while performing overriding in case the return types are covariant or the class name having the parent and child relationship. Again, for example, I create one more bank. So a bank with the name, let's say, American Express, right? Amex. Now, what I'm gonna do, I want to change the return type of this to a different class, right? I can change the return type of this HSPC to MX as well. So in that case, I need to return an object of MX, which equal to new MX, right? And over here, the return type will also be MX. Now you can see immediately I got an error. So it says that the return type is not compatible. Why? Because MS still does not have a parent and child relationship with RBI. As soon as I create that relation, I'll say MX extends RBI, you're going to see that the error will go away, right? So that is what covariant means, right? So there has to be a parent child relationship in these return types, then you should be able to override this method. Now the overriding is actually happening. Now one more important example. In Java we have 8 primitive data types, and against all primitive data types we have a class associated with it, right? For example, like if I talk about some of them, we have a primitive data type int, where there's a class called as integer, right? We have a data type as double, where the class is also double. And similarly, for char, we have a class called as character. So these are also called as wrapper classes. Now again, there is a super class to these wrapper classes as well, right? Which is called as a number class, right? Now just look at it carefully. These are very important concepts. So go to Google and search for number class Java doc, right? You're gonna see it over here. Now this is a class number, and you can see the subclasses over here. Byte is there, double is there, float is there, integer is there, long is there, right? So all these are the child classes to the number class. So for example, I create another method over here, and the method name is, let's say, show, right? And what this method is returning its something like 10. So the return type will be int. I can also write integer over here instead of int. So what we are actually doing over here, we are actually wrapping this into an integer class, right? We are wrapping the integer, the int data type into integer class. And when do we have a method type as a return type as a class name? So when it actually returns an object. So what we are actually doing over here is we are converting int to the integer class object. And now this 10 is not integer. Now this 10 is not int. it is actually being converted into object of an integer class. Now, I'm going to explain this thing with another example. Let's say, in case if you have already worked on WebDriver, so you remember we generally write it like this: WebDriver equal to new Firefox driver or new Chrome driver. Right, where we are actually creating an object of Firefox driver, but the reference type, this is the reference variable, the reference type is of WebDriver. So how is this possible? Can we store one class object into the type of any different class? Can we do that? So you can try doing it. Just create a class, let's say test A, and another class test B, and then create an object of test B class and give the type as test A, and just see whether it will gonna accept it or not. Obviously it will not gonna accept it, right? Then how this is possible? How this is possible in case when you're working on Selenium WebDriver, whenever you call a Firefox browser, you do it something like this. So this is allowed through polymorphism and inheritance. So what we call this as, we call it as a polymorphic reference. So this is what the polymorphic reference is. And this is the core of the OOPS concept. So polymorphic core is this actually. Right. I mean polymorphism core is this actually. This is what polymorphic reference is. So with the help of polymorphic reference, we can store any child class object into the reference of the parent class. And that is what is happening over here. So do remember, if you have multiple classes are having a parent and child relationship, so you can you can define the type, the polymorphic reference with the help of the type as parent and the object as that particular class. But again, one thing to remember that we cannot store the object of a parent class into a child class reference. That is not possible, right? So same way, if I go to Citibank and if I create an object of Citibank like this, if I create a city obj2 equal to new city, I can do it in this way, and I can also do it in this way, and it will allow it. It won't give you any error, but you cannot do it like this. You cannot have the child class reference to the parent class object. This is not possible, right? So we can do it like this. And how this is possible? This is possible just because of polymorphism. And polymorphism is possible with the help of inheritance. Right? So all these things are interrelated. You cannot achieve polymorphism till the time inheritance is not there. Now tell me, can I store the object of integer into the number class reference? Yes, we can do it. So what I can do is I can go over here, instead of this integer, I can change it to number, the parent class reference. Now same method I'll gonna copy and I'll move it to SBI. Oh, sorry, Citibank. Now see, there is no change over here. There is no error because like the method signature and the return types both are same, right? Now instead of number, I can change the return type to integer. And still you can see that there is no error, right? Why? Because the types are covariant. The return types are class names and there is a parent-child relationship between these classes, right? So that is where the return types are covariant. You can keep them in your methods which you are overriding it. Right. So this is a fixed interview question, right? So do remember this thing. This is very, very important in terms of overriding. It's been asked in interviews quite a lot of time. All right. So just go through it carefully.